Geoff was nominated for Life Member last year, and it was voted upon last year, but he wasn't able to be here, so we've deferred it until today, the actual presentation, but we don't actually get to vote today on the Life membership. The occasion's being live streamed, and that's in recognition of Geoff's very, very long work as our TAFE TA president, and the very, very high esteem that he is held in by all our members across the state. There was a time when it wasn't a rally if it wasn't Geoff up the front giving the speech, rousing us all to action. Going to Geoff's start, as a uni student, he held a number of jobs, one of which was a telegram boy delivering the telegrams on a bike. Now, if you can remember a telegram boy, you've either got grey hairs or you've got no hairs at all. And certainly my children and my grandchildren wouldn't know what a telegram boy does or is. And he also worked as a shop assistant and a legal clerk, and I strongly suspect the legal clerk was a grand way of describing an office boy, but I'm not sure. So that was while he was studying. When he graduated with a BA and then with a DipEd from Sydney Teachers College, he became a school teacher. He didn't realise what delights TAFE had to offer at that stage. He was an activist in campus. He was very involved in the Vietnam War anti-conscription campaign and the opposition to our involvement in the war in general. His first appointment as a school teacher was to Western Sydney. He had several locations there, and as soon as he became a teacher, he joined Teachers Federation. He also participated in radicalising the students he was teaching into helping to oppose the Vietnam War and be involved in marches and so on. He then travelled overseas for a while, and when he came back as a temporary organiser in New South Wales Teachers Federation. And as part of that job, he was in charge of visiting many of the child welfare institutions where we had teaching staff. And as a result of that, he became very aware of the iniquities and the problems, the issues that there were in those institutions. And he ended up writing a report which led to significant improvements for the children who were in those institutions, which I think is a marvellous thing to have done, and may well be part of the reason why in retirement he's very involved in visiting prisons, because he's seen what entrenched disadvantage can lead to if it's not helped in the early stages, if kids aren't given a chance. He joined TAFE in 1976 in Wollongong as a teacher in humanities. Now, if you're an old TAFE, you know what Wollongong means in those days. That was a bastion of TAFE TA activism, and we've got one of the people responsible for that activism here, Comrade Sir Big Russ Hanna. Not sure in what order the comrade and the sir go, but he's up there. And Jack Allen and Barry Spooner, very, very strong TAFE TA activists, and it was the most active TAFE TA branch that we had in New South Wales. It was fantastic. Many campaigns were fought there, and Jerry Watt, you were probably involved in that too. There were never any doubt that the union was really listened to on the two Wollongong campuses. After that, he went to Blacktown and ended up at Randwick, which is the location. Bankstown, apologies. And then he ended up in Randwick. Geoff was president of TAFE TA for 24 years. That is a magnificent achievement. It's an astonishingly long time, and he was magnificent. He was inclusive, he was fair, he was highly regarded by everyone, and he was the most professional meeting chair I have ever come across. It was astonishing how seamlessly those meetings ran. I learned a lot from him, and particularly when I was his deputy, it was quite an anxiety thing for me at the beginning to have to take a couple of hours of a meeting, because that we sort of rotated during the day, and have him sitting there and me think, oh God, am I doing the right thing? Oh, where's my rules and so on? I ended up writing a cheat sheet on how meetings should run, which has been used by presidents ever since, but which I developed simply because I needed to be able to show Geoff that I could do it. And it was he was so good that virtually no one ever got the better of him in running a meeting, except for possibly very, very occasionally Al Svirskas, but that would have been very occasional. Geoff represented us at branch, state and national level, and it was always with the utmost integrity, good humour and diligence. And you could really rely on him to get it right and to say the right thing and to be intrinsically honest. He was the Fed Rep on the New South Wales TAFE Commission for 6 years and a Federation Vice President for 23 years, and he also represented TAFE TA on Federation Executive, which was wonderful for us. He was at the absolute forefront of the 1812 campaign, which was the blooding for many activists in TAFE TA. That was for many of us our first involvement in Federation activism. That was about reducing the teaching hours for trade teachers because there was an inherent ridiculous gap between the hours the trade teachers had to teach and the hours that business teachers like me taught, and that had to be equalised. There were many strikes and there were many teachers who were stood down. My own experience at Granville at that time, I was the Fed Rep at that stage and the branch president, was that the principal secretary, the principal would be told he had to go to such and such a section and stand down so many people. So the principal's secretary would phone up the section down the bottom of the college or wherever and say, look, Fred's on his way down. He's got to stop and talk to the maintenance people. He'll be there in 10 minutes to stand down Joe and Blow and so on. And, okay, in 10 minutes he'd arrive and those people would have disappeared. And of course, if he couldn't see them, he couldn't hand them the letter standing them down, so they didn't get stood down. But that's not the way it operated in most colleges. That was rare. And it was a very, very bitter fight. And Geoff was at the forefront of that fight. He was there at all the rallies and he was giving vintage speeches where they all started off with, comrades, colleagues, and it was always a clear call to action. It was, the arm was raised, the fist was clenched, the passion was there in every word. And we would all highly anticipate those speeches and there would be silence. You could hear a pin drop while Geoff was speaking. It was fantastic. They were riveting speeches and always effective. Never anybody dissenting, or if they did, they would be jumped on by the rest of the audience. I have very many memories of those fantastic strike meetings. And when it was a double act with Brian Mulvey as TAFE TA secretary, it was just something that you would have paid money to be at. It was so good. So what we're here to appreciate as well is a lifetime of commitment to activism in social justice issues, in environmental issues and in the peace movement and in TAFE TA for the members and for the students from Geoff. In retirement, he's still active as a prison visitor, and I also wanted to pay tribute to his partner Angela, who has always stood by his side, given him staunch support. It was a very time-consuming role for him to be TAFE TA president and all the other things he did in the union, and she stood by him and allowed us to have him for that time. So Angela, we really thank you for that. TAFE TA thanks you. It's Geoff you're here to listen to. I hope we get a vintage speech. And I'll finish by saying that I've got the utmost respect for Geoff, as do all TAFE TA members across New South Wales and AEU members in other states. We salute you, Geoff, and we thank you for all you've done for the association and for our TAFE students. Our best wishes go with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Astrid, for those kind words. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet, the Gadigal clan of the Eora Nation. I pay my respects to elders past and present and to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Comrades, to receive life membership of the TAFE Teachers Association, the association of which I was a member for 41 years and president for 24 years, is a great honour, and I thank you sincerely. Of course, nothing is achieved as an individual. Our power lies in the strength of the collective. My father left school at 13 and worked in various jobs, including miner in the lead, zinc and silver mines at Broken Hill. He died prematurely in his early 60s from dust on the lungs. His union, the Miners' Federation, was a great source of support and strength for him, just as the TAFE TA and the New South Wales Teachers Federation have been a great source of support and strength for me. He would be very proud if he were here today. My lovely wife Angela has supported my activism over many years, for which I thank her most warmly. I had a wonderful public education. Wentworthville Public School in the western suburbs of Sydney, Parramatta High School and Sydney University. I completed a degree part-time at night while working in a variety of jobs, and I spent 1 year full-time at university on a mature age scholarship while studying for my diploma in education at Sydney Teachers College, then a part of Sydney University. I revelled in being a full-time student for the first time and became involved in a range of activities on campus. It was 1969 and Australia had committed troops to the Vietnam War. At one protest against the war, I joined other students on campus in a sit-down outside the Great Hall during a parade of the University Regiment. The soldiers marched right over us, but not even the Sydney University Regiment was going to deter us. "We shall not be moved," we chanted, and remained put. I commenced teaching in 1970 and, of course, immediately joined the New South Wales Teachers Federation. I have fond memories of wearing my Vietnam moratorium badge and, together with a number of senior students, walking out of the school in defiance of a departmental directive and attending the moratorium march in Sydney, proudly marching under the Federation banner against the Vietnam War, all the time knowing we had the protection of the New South Wales Teachers Federation. I had the privilege of teaching in both our great public schools and TAFE colleges, all of which had strong, militant union branches. In 1976, I was appointed to Wollongong TAFE College as a teacher of humanities. Here I found three kindred spirits in Jack Allen, Russell Hanna and Barry Spooner, all committed unionists and all on the left of the political spectrum. We led the branch during the long and bitter Wollongong dispute. Three comrades were stood down for alleged breaches of departmental policies and procedures. Upholding a basic union philosophy of touch one, touch all, the branch went on strike for 3 days, the longest in TAFE-TA's history. During the dispute, we rallied outside the offices of the Public Service Board in Sydney. We were led by Max Taylor, the General Secretary of the Federation. As the bureaucrats peered warily down at us from the 5th floor windows, with us staring back up at them, Max shouted out through a loud hailer, "Come down, you cowards, and face the teachers." Needless to say, they refused to budge. Not deterred, Max led us up the lifts and we occupied the foyer of the bureaucrats' offices. After an hour of shouting slogans, they agreed to talk to us, but there was no resolution of the dispute. Ultimately, the dispute ended up in court. Members picketed the college and held noisy demonstrations outside the local courthouse. And I can assure you, no one crossed the picket line. Several times the magistrate had to suspend proceedings because of the noise coming from outside the court. Our comrades were fined, but never paid the fines. With the support of the New South Wales Teachers Federation, the Wollongong TAFE-TA branch had won the day, demonstrating what can be achieved through solidarity and united industrial action. When I began teaching in TAFE in 1976, I immediately became active in what was then the Technical Teachers Association. At that time, the executive of the association met at Ultimo TAFE College. It was largely through the efforts of Bronwyn Marks and I that the executive began meeting at Federation head office in Sussex Street. We wanted the association to have a much closer relationship with the Federation and believed that meeting in Sussex Street was a step towards achieving that end. My first national conference was the National TAFE Council in Hobart in 1977. It was held at the University of Tasmania and we stayed in the students' accommodation. It was extremely rewarding to meet with TAFE colleagues from throughout the country, learn what was happening in other states and territories, and determine national strategies. I fondly remember driving to a national conference in Brisbane with Paddy George, a great TAFE activist who died much too young. There are two campaigns which stand out in the history of the TAFE-TA. One was our campaign to reduce teaching hours for trade and related teachers in TAFE, who at that time taught 6 hours a week, 6 hours a week more than their colleagues in other teaching areas. This was the famous 1812 campaign. It was a protracted dispute, with TAFE teachers taking strike action and many of them being stood down. The campaign resulted in a reduction of 4 hours a week for trade and related teachers, which brought them into line with other TAFE teachers, whose weekly teaching load had unfortunately been increased from 18 to 20 by the Industrial Relations Commission. The other was the campaign to achieve equal salaries for all TAFE teachers. There were differential salary rates, with trade and related teachers being paid less than their colleagues in other teaching disciplines. After a long and at times bitter campaign, equal pay for all TAFE teachers was achieved. Looking back over 41 years, there are two personal highlights I want to mention. In 1992, Federation sent the President Phil Cross and me overseas to study systems of vocational education and training in Singapore, South Korea, Germany, Sweden, England and Scotland. The tour was generously funded by Phil from fees that he received as a member of the New South Wales TAFE Commission Board. We visited educational institutions and held discussions with trade unionists, educators, students, employers, industry representatives and government officials. The study tour was extremely worthwhile and proved of immense value to the union. In 1994, I was chosen by the AEU to participate in a trade union training program for teacher unionists in Vietnam. The courses were held in Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City and involved over 100 delegates from remote areas in Vietnam. Together with a colleague from Victoria, we gave lectures, ran workshops and facilitated discussions. It was a privilege to share experiences with our Vietnam colleagues, some of whom had fought in the war to liberate Vietnam. With other comrades in the Federation, I have been involved in campaigns against the Vietnam War, conscription, apartheid, the Franklin River Dam and the Iraq War. Consequently, I came to the attention of ASIO, who in 1999 released 29 heavily redacted pages of my file, whilst withholding 8 pages. It makes for very interesting reading. For 9 years, I have been an official visitor in the New South Wales prison system. Official visitors monitor the prison environment and follow up inmates' inquiries and complaints. I have a strong commitment to prison reform and reducing reoffending. Comrades, of course, the struggle to properly fund TAFE continues, with Stop TAFE Cuts campaign standing as a beacon in the fight for justice for students in our TAFE colleges throughout Australia. The New South Wales TAFE TA has always been in the vanguard of campaigns to defend and advance our publicly funded TAFE colleges, and I know that will continue. I also know the TAFE TA is in good hands. Over my 41 years as a member of the TAFE TA, I have stood shoulder to shoulder with many activists in many campaigns, and some of them are here today. And I salute you. I thank you for your comradeship, your support, encouragement and friendship throughout those years. Of course, one of those activists is our present Federation President, Maury Mulheron, a dear friend and comrade. Maury is one of TAFE's greatest champions. I also want to thank the wonderful staff of the post-school unit for their support and friendship over many years, and for the important contribution that they make to the TAFE TA. Again, comrades, I thank you for this great honour, which I will treasure always.